We're now going to move on to another closed system and case study, and we're going to be focusing on a new country that has joined the ranks of the IATR. We're very, very pleased and proud for the first time to have not only Blair with us, but a delegation of government officials from Australia. If you could just stand up when I call you and introduce yourselves. We have Ian Shepherd, Gary Ellis, and Megan Burke O'Neill. Welcome, Australia. It's good to have you here, and welcome from down under. I know you've been jet-lagged, and we're trying to get beyond that. We also have with us the person I'm now going to introduce is going to talk about the Australian taxi system is my friend Blair Davies. Blair is the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Taxi Industries, the Australian Taxi Industry Association, and also the Taxi Council of Queensland. He has been very, very involved with national trade groups and the TLPA, and has done a lot for his industry. He has a wealth of knowledge that he's going to share about the entire system, and I know it's really going to blow your mind when you hear about it. And what I like about the Australians is they have a great sense of humor too. I don't know if you picked up on this, but I will quote his bio. He puts a personal note in here. Blair has, number one, 3 university degrees, a rapidly receding hairline. You are bold. And a passion for helping government regulators make better decisions. Now, that's what we like to hear, right? So, without any further ado, I want to welcome our friend Blair Davies, who's going to educate us about Australia, the land down under, and the medallion. Welcome, Blair.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me first start with a thank you to Matt. It's a real privilege for the Australian Taxi Industry Association to be able to present to you today about our industry down under. And if I get some things wrong, please have a chat to Gary Ellis down the back there. He's been associated with our industry for an awful long time as a regulator, but I'll do my very best. And I've got a short amount of time, so I'll try and speak reasonably quickly, and I apologise for the accent. I don't recognise that I've got an accent, but I've had difficulty ordering coffee wherever I've gone here in Chicago, so there must be something wrong with the way I'm pronouncing some things. In talking about the industry down under, I thought we'd look at some background for you, just to explain a little bit about Australia and where we fit into the world scene. And then talk about the structure of our industry, and then touch on a few salient points. So I think everywhere around the globe, the taxi industry is interested in green issues, accessible issues. We're also looking at safety, and as we heard yesterday, we've got to look outside our comfort zone at some non-traditional areas, so I'll talk a little bit about what we've been doing down in Australia. For those people that don't know what a map of Australia looks like, that's one of them. The blue parts are the growth areas, and the red parts are the bits that are going backwards. And essentially, there's a couple of big red spots in the middle there. They've probably lost 2 people or something like that. They had low population densities in the first place, so don't worry about them at all. Somewhere around about there, down that east coast, in pretty much a ribbon down to about Melbourne, is where the significant part of the Australian population exists. And then there's population centres with Adelaide and Perth. And essentially Australia is an urbanised country. 89% of people live in a city. We don't see a lot of crocodiles and kangaroos, albeit there are crocodiles and kangaroos in Australia. We just don't see them running down the middle of our streets. You may have heard different, but it's simply not true. We're a country of about 21.5 million people. We're the world's smallest continent, but we are a continent. That means that we're about the 6th largest country in area, but only the 55th largest in population. It then means that we're about a quarter of the size of the USA in terms of population, and about 2/3 the size of Canada. And we've got a growth rate of 1.2%, which means that we're not catching up anyone particularly quickly. In terms of GDP, we stand, though, 18th in the world, so we rank amongst the top 20, where the USA is second and Canada is just a bit above us at 15th. And in terms of public debt, though, interestingly enough, we're 108th, which is a nice place to be. 17.6% of our GDP is associated with public debt. The USA beats us. You guys apparently owe about 52% of your GDP. And Canada, which seemingly got an accolade from the President, has 75% of its GDP that it owes. So we're standing pretty well during the global financial crisis that we inherited from everywhere else in the world. Interestingly enough, we didn't go into recession. We didn't record negative growth. We got down to about 1%, but we still stayed in positive numbers. But what we did see in the taxi industry, like over here, it was very difficult times for us. We're struggling and surviving and still keeping our head above water. Just a few more statistics for you. We got one of our demographers down in Australia to have a look at our population, and what we see is that we're an ageing population, so very similar to the States in that regard. 20% of our population has some form of disability or other, and I think that's almost the same as America as well. And what we see for our country, of course, is that over the next, we're out to 2016 or so, that area there is a growth area for us. And so we're expecting as the population ages and people acquire disabilities, they will become more reliant on door-to-door, on-demand type transportation services, and therefore, from a taxi industry point of view, we've earmarked that as a growth area for us. It's not an area that we're running and hiding from, it's something that we see as something that we can make money out of, and we're pursuing it with as much vigour as we possibly can. We see also for the taxi industry, innovation and flexibility are going to be key issues for us. We see that passenger transportation is our business, and where people want to move, we need to adapt our services accordingly, not just stay within the bounds of what is a traditional taxi industry. And just a few more stats for you. It's death by PowerPoint slides today. You'll see there in 1996, we had the majority of our drivers were Australian born, 56% of them. In 2006, it had dropped down to about 40%, and it's dropping even further. So we're catching up with the rest of the world in that regard. Also, back in 1996, you would see that predominantly male, still predominantly male taxi drivers. 2/3 of our drivers, though, their first language was English, and accordingly our training in those days used to be structured around a very simple English language test. Now we've seen a drop where under 50% of our drivers, their first language is English, and if we did a poll today, we'd find that that's even less. And obviously we need to focus on how we skill up our drivers in English and how we have an appropriate test. We've just developed a national English language test which is rolling out across Australia so that we can make sure that our drivers can understand and can be understood by their passengers. We are a medallion system, as Matt told you, and as you'll see on that table, prices vary for medallions across the various states. In Gary's area, they're about $470,000, which is the top of that list, albeit we've got medallions that sell for something like $600,000 on the Gold Coast and other places. In my hometown, which is Brisbane, they're around about $415,000, and the average across Australia is about $400,000 in capital cities. There's about 19,000 taxis, and the average fare is about $21. Australian dollars. And the conversion rate at the moment, I think, is about $1 Australian dollar buys 92 American cents, not dollars, of course. The average distance for one of our jobs is 8.4 kilometres, which is a tick over, I suppose, about 5 miles. 38% of taxi services are booked. Now, my hometown of Brisbane, it's about 50%. And I'll just speculate for you that the better the taxi service, then the higher proportion will be booked, because people can rely on the cab turning up. And New Yorkers can make of that what they will. And there's about 70,000 taxi drivers. In terms of medallion prices, I know that's of interest to regulators, so there's a little bit of a graph of how they've moved in Brisbane. In 1991, they were around about $150,000. They're up to about $415,000. We look at medallion prices basically growing by about 5 or 6% in terms of capital growth, and also creating an income stream or return on capital of about 5 to 6%. We don't see them as spectacular performers. We'd be worried if medallions were leading the market that way, but we do see them that they should be a reasonable investment, and if the competitive market is working well, then they should sit in that sort of area, bearing in mind that medallions, or in Australia at least, have some degree of risk. There's always a regulator out there who's thinking about deregulating our industry and taking those medallion prices down to zero. Now moving on quickly to talk about the structure of the industry. We are a medallion-based system, so what's a medallion for us? We call it a licence, sometimes called a taxi plate, but effectively they can be sold by tender by government, and so they find their own market value. Governments have released them at fixed prices, released them by ballots at different times, but in my state of Queensland, they're released by public tender. They're a perpetual renewable licence to apply for hire. They can do hail, rank and booking work. They're an on-demand service, and they're required to operate 24/7. They can be traded and they can be leased, and this system applies pretty much everywhere with the exception of the Northern Territory, so it's Australia-wide. They're required to affiliate with a taxi booking company, except in our smallest state, which is Tasmania, and also the Northern Territory. And that requirement to affiliate with a taxi booking company, and I'll probably need to talk about what a taxi booking company is a little later in this presentation, but they're required to affiliate with a call centre that provides a 24/7 dispatch service, and that's for safety reasons, but it's also for good efficiency reasons. And from an industry point of view, we see that as a crucial part of the way that taxis are regulated in Australia. And just picking up on one of the comments in the earlier conversation, a medallion system in Australia applies from our capital cities. So Sydney's got 5,000 medallions, down to country towns with 3 and 4 taxis. And even in some of those 3 and 4 taxi areas, if it's a tourist area, you can find that the licence values or the medallion prices are still over 200,000. We also have in the country regional areas medallions where it's basically $1, so it's a peppercorn amount of money. Just speaking about medallions as well, interestingly enough, there are no rules which particularly require medallions to be owner-drivers, but I'll explain that, I'll qualify that a little bit later as well. But you typically find in Australia about a third of the medallions are owned by people that drive taxis, and about 2/3 of the medallions are owned by what we'd call fleet managers, and there are some benefits associated with that. When you're looking at the Australian taxi industry, what you'll find is that it's a multi-fleet or multi-vehicle fleet, and so we've got typical sedans and wagons that you'd see in an American taxi company. Probably smaller sedans than you'd have over here. We don't have anything like the Crown Vic, but we've using Toyota Priuses, Toyota Camrys, Toyota Avalons, and the staple of the industry has been the Ford Falcon, which is a 6-cylinder Ford sedan. We've also got accessible vehicles, we've got high occupancy vehicles, so vans, and we've also got luxury vehicles, so vehicles that are priced over $57,000, $58,000. Drivers, as I mentioned before, can be owner drivers. They can be leasing the medallion, or they can be bailing the medallion. We talk about bailment, which is the ability to use property or a right to be able to use property